welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Wednesday, May 8th. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far. Halfway through the week. We already a full week into the month of May. Time continues to fly. The NFL season continues to get closer. We got OTAs coming up as phase 3 of the offseason will begin in a couple weeks. Then you'll shortly after that have training camp, which will begin late in July. You'll have the 40-day period in between training camp, which is always a long wait, but you can start to smell football. It is in the air. The weather is warm in the tri-state area, and that signals training camp. That signals OTAs and a lot of optimism around these New York Jets. This is episode 304 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you as always for joining me. I want to thank you all so much for hitting 300 subscribers. We did that on Monday afternoon, so I appreciate all the support. It has been amazing to see all you guys support the channel, both support the podcast, both on YouTube and, of course, all over all the different audio platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, all of those different ones. We got you covered, so appreciate all the support. If you haven't already, do make sure to please like and subscribe. Setting a goal of 1,000 subscribers by week 1. So we are getting there, and week 1 will be here before you know it. So appreciate all of the support as always. It has been amazing, and can't wait to continue to produce a lot of content for you all with a couple special big things planned coming up for the 2024 season, which is hopefully a good one for the New York Jets. So we got a couple things to get into today on the podcast. I wanted to start off with just some takeaways from camp in terms of the roster. The New York Jets signed 3 players to the roster. They also released 3 players coming out of rookie minicamp over the weekend, which was Friday through Sunday. A 3-day rookie minicamp has come and gone. So we'll break down those moves quickly. And then I want to get into kind of how the New York Jets 53-man roster shakes out right now. Rich Cimini the other day of ESPN, beat writer for the New York Jets, basically tweeted out the 2 deep Jets depth chart right now as currently constructed. As we sit here, May 8th, that's what this roster will look like. So I want to break it down, the 2 deep depth chart, where the Jets look good, where there still are some areas to improve, and if they do improve in those areas, who they could target, some free agencies, some free agents still available that they could go after. Of course, there's always those lingering free agents, those veterans that get signed in August, mid-August, near the start of the regular season. You saw that last year with Dalvin Cook. We've seen it all the time. So do the New York Jets wait for something like that, or do they go after somebody earlier than that? We will see, but we will break down the roster as currently constructed now that we got a pretty good idea of what this roster is going to look like going into week 1, minus a couple other things here and there the rest of the way, as we are now a couple weeks removed from the 2024 NFL draft. So let's start with the rookie minicamp. That was completed on Sunday. Of course, I did a rookie minicamp episode on Saturday, breaking down some press conferences of Corley's. Obviously, Fashanu, of course, spoke as well. Yes, finally decided to pronounce his name right. Was calling him Fashanu there for a while. I still might call him Fashanu every once in a while if I forget, but I think a lot of Jets content creators, a lot of Jets fans for a while there was calling him Fashanu, whatever it is. There's been some kind of mix up in names, but either way, we broke some of that down. So if you haven't checked that episode out, you could definitely do so. That was on Saturday. But coming out of rookie minicamp, the New York Jets signed 3 players to the roster, and they also released 3 players from the team. So we'll start quickly here with the 3 guys that they signed. First was Andrew Peasley, quarterback out of Wyoming. All of these guys were present for rookie minicamp, so obviously they saw some things out of these guys. He's 6'2", 218 pounds. He spent 6 years in college football, 4 with Utah State and 2 with Wyoming. He played in 2023. He played 12 games, completed 62.4% of his passes for 1,991 yards, 20 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. So solid numbers overall, just a tick below 2,000 yards on the season, had the 20 touchdowns, limited the turnovers. This is a camp arm, You don't know quite what Jordan Travis is going to be during camp. While the Jets seem optimistic, he still isn't going to go out there and take all the reps. They're still going to ease him into it. He is coming off of a major broken leg. Still remarkable to see him making the progress that he is making well less than a year removed from the injury, just really a couple months removed from the injury that he sustained late in Florida State's season last year. So you obviously will have him. Of course, you've got Tyrod Taylor and Rodgers, but Rodgers you don't want to overwork either. He's not going to play preseason games, maybe outside of the one drive he'll get in the final preseason game like we saw him do last year against the New York Giants. Tyrod's another guy too, has a lot of miles on his tires, has a little bit of an injury history. You don't want anything to happen with him. So you want to make sure that Rodgers and Tyrod are working, of course, but not doing too much and not overworking, of course, in the preseason games, because those two guys you don't really need to see much in the preseason because we know what they're going to do. You want to see Jordan Travis, what he can do, and of course these other arms that can just eat up reps, take some reps, play a lot in those preseason games, especially some of the earlier ones, in games 1, game 2, maybe even game 3. It's not really until game 4 where you'll probably see Rodgers go out there for a drive and then see Taylor probably maybe take it the rest of the way. So Andrew Peasley, a camp arm. Obviously, the Jets saw something in him over the 3 days at rookie minicamp, so he signs on to the roster. Maybe he lands on the practice squad. We'll see, but I don't think you should expect much more out of him. You move on here. Colby Suits was the other quarterback coming out of Houston Christian. He's 6'4", 240 pounds. He spent 5 years at college football, so Peasley and Suits combined 11 years between the two. 4 with UL Monroe and 1 with Houston Christian. Last season in 10 games played, he completed 56% of his passes for 1,919 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. Size-wise, he's built like a quarterback. 6'4", 240, built like an NFL quarterback. Numbers weren't too impressive at Houston Christian. Did spend some time in college football, 5 years, so a good chunk of time there. Of course, Peasley with 6 years, so 2 guys that got a lot of playing under their belt. Another camp arm. Jets now have 5 quarterbacks: Rodgers, Tyrod, Jordan Travis, and of course Peasley and Suits will now also join on as those camp arms, or I guess if you want to call them Strevler arms, who has kind of been that training camp arm that the New York Jets have used the last couple years. Of course, came in a Jacksonville game for the atrocious Zach Wilson. The final player they signed is a name that I would actually watch out for, just because of the fact that the new return rules, a guy like this could be similar to an Xavier Gibson last year. That is a surprise that makes the roster, and that's Brandon Cotterington. He's a defensive back and a return specialist out of North Carolina Central. He's 5'7", 176 pounds, so very, very small, not big at all. But this is a guy that is a return monster. Last year, he returned 2 punts for a touchdown, and both of those, 2 punts for a touchdown that were both over 80 yards. So he had 2 return touchdowns on the punt that were over 80 yards. So a guy that has a serious threat as a return specialist. We heard Robert Saleh say on his Saturday press conference I believe Friday press conference rather, at rookie minicamp, that is Davis, Braylon Allen are both going to be 2 guys, of course, that they drafted. Davis in the 5th round, Allen in the 4th round. Davis coming by a little bit of a surprise, but it seems like both those guys could play a role on special teams. You also have Izzy maybe that'll play a role on special teams. You also have Xavier Gibson, who's going to compete for a role on special teams. And now you add Cotterington into the mix. He could also play a role in the special team. So I'm not saying he's going to make the roster. I'm not saying this is going to be the guy that's going to make or break the Jets season. But it is a name to look out for, unlike Peasley and Suits that are mainly just being brought in to take up some reps to be camp arms. Cotterington's a guy, returning-wise, with the new kickoff rules, the Jets seem to have a wide range of options that they're going to look at during camp. He could be a name that could potentially find himself on the roster, or at least the practice squad, or at least impressing enough to maybe land with another team once cuts are made. So a name to look out for there. He played 4 years at college, all with North Carolina Central. In those 41 games, from a defensive perspective, he had 93 total tackles, 10 passes defended, 2 tackles for loss. So you kind of have Allen, Davis, of course, will be in the mix. I would assume Davis probably more than Allen. I think if Davis wants to make the roster and be a contributor, he's going to have to play a lot on special teams. Gibson, of course, is still in the mix. Gibson, while he had some moments last year, he still had some rookie mistakes. He wasn't perfect. He still has a lot to grow. So I wouldn't necessarily say his spot is secure. Not saying he's going to lose the job, but there can still be room for competition there. It kind of feels like a 4 or 5 way group of players right now that's going to be competing for a special teams role come camp. Players that they released, 3 guys. Pee Wee Jarrett, quarterback out of West Florida, 6'3", 225 pounds, spent 2 seasons or a couple seasons at in D2, over 5,000 passing yards. We talked about him a little bit. Really no need to. They released him. Pee Wee Jarrett. The name was cool. We'll see if he lands somewhere else. Nothing too crazy. If anything, he would have been a camp arm. Jets fans are a little upset because of the name, and he has pretty good arm strength, but obviously the Jets value the other 2 guys more. They also moved on from Trey Jenkins, who's kind of a linebacker safety hybrid. He was out of San Jose State, and they also moved on from Manny Jones, who's a defensive lineman, has spent some time with the Cardinals, the Patriots, the Saints, was actually with the practice squad last year. Got added on December 19th, so spent some time towards the end of the year on the practice squad, so he is released. So once again, Andrew Peasley, Colby Suits, and Brandon Codrington got signed and released was Pee Wee Jarrett, Trey Jenkins, and Manny Jones. So those are your main roster moves coming out of the rookie minicamp weekend, which really kind of just flies. I mean, the Jets do things a little bit differently where it's a lot of the UDFAs getting reps. There's not really much of action for didn't really see much of Olu. I mean, with the calf injury that he suffered running the 40 at the combine, he was kind of doing some just agility stuff on his own, more, I guess, rehabbing back. Travis was really just doing stuff on the bike. He's still on his way back from injury, not quite ready to go. Corley was really the only one out of those 3 guys that you saw doing extensive work, routes, drills, ladders, all that stuff. So you probably saw most of Corley than anything else. So that's rookie minicamp. Now we move on here to the New York Jets as currently constructed, their 2-deep depth chart. So Rich Cimini the other day, of course, covers the Jets for ESPN, posted their 2-deep depth chart on Twitter, and we're going to break it down. Look at where the Jets are strong right now. Of course, we kind of know the areas already where their strengths come. We'll, of course, look at some weaknesses and really how this roster looks. And I'll just start with this because it's either I say it now or I say it at the end. And I've had my battles. There's a lot of people I know that are fans of the division rivals. I've got friends of mine that are fans of all 3 AFC or all 4 AFC East teams. Jets, Dolphins, Patriots, Bills fans, of course. And believe me, it's still something with the Jets, and I fully understand. And I've said this from the minute last season ended, that they got to prove it to me. Douglas, this front office, this coaching staff, they've all got to prove it to me, because until I see results on the field, I'm not going to completely buy in. And I'm still in that mindset. Wow, I love what the New York Jets did this offseason, and all Jets fans should. If you don't like what the New York Jets did this offseason, and I don't really know what type of a fan you are, I don't know how much football you really know, because they filled pretty much every need every need they had, they pretty much filled it. If you remove the Jets name, you remove the logo, you remove all of that stuff, the same old Jets, and you just look at this roster on paper, this roster is by far one of the best rosters we've had in franchise history from a Jet fan perspective. But if you're looking at just an outsider perspective, you take off the green goggles as a Jets fan, and for NFL fans, you take off, it's the same old Jets, all that stuff. If you remove that and you just look at this group of players on paper, now on paper is key, but that's all we got right now. We don't have games yet. So all we could do right now is just talk about what things look like on paper. But on paper, this team is easily a top 5, top 7, top 10 roster in football. And I don't think it's much of a debate. There's a strong case you can make, which I actually made in an article I wrote, that this is the best roster talent-wise in the AFC East. Now, I think when you break it down in the AFC East, quarterback goes to Buffalo. I would give the running back to Miami just because of the 1-2 punch with Mostert and Achane. The Jets are still trying to find that number 2 behind Breece Hall. I did end up giving receiving core to Miami as well. I still think Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle is arguably one of the best 1-2 punches in the league. tight end to Buffalo. But you can make the case with the Jets. I did get off offensive linemen to the Jets, but really what separates it is defensively. I think the Jets have the best defensive line, the best linebacker core, the best corner group in the division. And I think when you break it down, the New York Jets are best in the division at 4 position groups: offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, cornerback. And in safety, I think it probably goes to Miami. Poyer, Javon Holland. You could also make a case for New England. Neither Buffalo or New York is in much of a strength. But anyway, here's the 2 deep depth chart. Rodgers, Tyrod, of course, your quarterbacks. Your running back, Breece Hall, Braylon Allen. You look at the receiving corps: Garrett Wilson, Malachi Corley, Mike Williams. And behind those guys, you've got Jason Brownlee, Xavier Gibson, Allen Lazard. As of right now, if the New York Jets would to roll into the season with 6 wide receivers, those would be your 6. I know you could probably make a case that maybe they could look to be improved. We'll get to that here in a second. You then go to tight end, Tyler Conklin, Jeremy Ruckert, and then you go to the offensive line. We'll start with left tackle, Smith and Fashanu. Guard is Simpson and Schweitzer. Center, Tippmann, Schweitzer. If they re-sign McGovern would probably slide in there. Right guard is ABT and Schweitzer as well. Schweitzer kind of could play anywhere. And then right tackle is Morgan Moses and Carter Warren. Your starting offensive line, of course, Tyron Smith, John Simpson, Joe Tippmann, AVT, and Morgan Moses. Arguably the best offensive line this team has had since at least 2015. And, of course, since arguably the best offensive line the Jets have ever had in franchise history in those 2009, 2010 teams, of course, headlined by Brick and Mangold and all those all-time great Jets. So you look at defensively, you go to defensive end, Hassan Reddick, Michael Clemens. Your 2 defensive tackles, Quinnen Williams, Solomon Thomas, and Javon Kinlaw and Lecky Fotu. You go to your other defensive end, that's Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald. Your linebacker groups are CJ Mosley, Jamie and Sherwood, and, of course, Quincy Williams and Chaz Surratt. Your nickel slot corner, Michael Carter, MC2, and Isaiah Oliver. Your other group of corners, Sauce Gardner and Quantez Stiggers, DJ Reed and Brandon Eccles. And then your safeties are Tony Adams, Jalen Key, and then Chuck Clark and Ashton Davis. So Jalen Key, as of right now, Samini actually put Key ahead of Jarek Bernard-Converse, which I thought was interesting, something to note. You can make a case for either, but as crazy as it sounds, the Jets with that kind of 4 rotation at safety, 4-man safety room, Key's, even though he's Mr. Irrelevant, he's going to have a chance to come in here and compete for a job just because of the fact that with the way the Jet safety room is built. Now, if they go out and sign a Justin Simmons, Key's chances of making the 53 when week 1 rolls around is going to be very, very difficult because that would mean he would have to jump one of the Adams, Clark, Davis, which I doubt happens, bearing some injury would be the only other way. But as of right now, Jalen Key, JBC, Jarek Bernard-Converse would probably be fighting for that final safety spot because your starters are Tony Adams, Chuck Clark, and then your depth would be Ashton Davis, and then a mixture of Key, JBC, somebody like that. Maybe if they, Stiggers, maybe if he ends up transforming into a safety, I don't know how they would do that. If they want to have him kind of be a corner safety hybrid type guy to go out and get Justin Simmons. Of course, there still could be some things there. So you look at that roster, and then you compare it to really what they were rolling out last year, and we'll do more breakdowns, of course, as the offseason and training camp ends up coming around and all that stuff. But when you just go back and look at the Jets roster prior to week 1 last year, I think one of the biggest changes, I think the biggest change comes at wide receiver in the offensive line, which is kind of obvious. We look at what the Jets were rolling out last year at wide receiver. Garrett Wilson, Allen Lazard, McCole Harmon were their 3 guys. This year, it's Mike Williams, Malachi Corley, and Garrett Wilson. Malachi Corley and Mike Williams are huge upgrades over Allen Lazard and whatever the heck McCole Harmon was with the New York Jets. You then look at the offensive line. Last year, left to right, Dwayne Brown, Laken Tomlinson, Connor McGovern, AVT, Mekhi Becton. Dwayne Brown doesn't have a team. Laken Tomlinson's a backup. McGovern's still a free agent. Becton signed with the Eagles. One of those guys is left, and that's AVT. That's the only remaining piece. And then, of course, Tippmann last year, who was number 2 on the depth chart, he ended up, of course, McGovern went down. He came in, played well. He'll slot in at center. So big upgrades there. But, what they did at wide receiver and what they did at offensive line is unbelievable. It really is. 3 offensive linemen in the offseason. Going into it, they needed that. They got 4, really, with Fashion, who, of course, 11th overall in this year's draft. So a lot to like there from the Jets' perspective. You look at their safeties last year: Jordan Whitehead, Tony Adams, Ashton Davis, Adrian Amos. Amos was a disaster. Whitehead, he was He wasn't, I don't think, what any Jets fan ever expected him to be when he signed here in the 2022 offseason. There still is more room to improvement, but I'm not really surprised with the way the Jets have built this safety room, just because of the fact that they have never really valued the safety position that much. You even go to the defenses ran by Saleh in San Francisco, their safeties were never the biggest names in the world. So I think they'll probably roll with this safety room. I would doubt Justin Simmons ends up here. I would love that to happen. I think if you get Justin Simmons here, he's a ball hawk guy that can pick quarterbacks off like it's nothing. I think that would be huge. I just don't see it happening. It also depends on in the cost range. This is also a team that had to lose JFM. Didn't want to pay JFM barely. He barely got anything in Denver. Jets weren't even willing to match that. So how much would they actually be willing to give to a Justin Simmons, who is the best player right now available on the safety market? And a starting caliber player as well. This isn't like you're picking up some depth guy. You're picking up a starter. So we'll see how that would work with the Jets and their cap or their money kind of constraints, the way things are right now after all their moves that they have made. But look, it's a very complete roster. I mean, there really isn't many holes. I think when you look at the offense, the biggest need probably is interior offensive line, whether you maybe bring McGovern back. I could see that being a possibility. Another guy that I'm surprised is still out there is Dalton Risner. I think he's a guy that many people probably could have expected would have went maybe even before John Simpson. You can make the case that Dalton Risner, interior offensive line-wise, might be even better than Simpson possibly. So I would be fully on board with Dalton Risner if the New York Jets could get him for the right price. And then, too, I still don't think it would hurt to bring in one more pass catcher. OBJ, of course, went to Miami. It didn't seem like there was much fire there for the Jets, just because of the fact that he would have been coming in here as a wide receiver, probably number 4, assuming he doesn't jump Corley. Corley, I think, is going to be a week 1 starter, which I think most fans would agree. So no surprise there. Boyd goes to Tennessee for a cheap contract. If the Jets are really interested in Boyd, they would have been able to get him for that cheap contract. The wide receiver market is pretty dried up by now. I don't think you're looking at – there's not too many guys out there probably in the Jets' price range that you really like and you would really want. The only guy I continue to think of that could potentially make a comeback, which would be in a perfect role, is Corey Davis. It felt like before free agency earlier in the offseason, there was some steam gaining behind him, and that he would make a decision as to where he would want to go, maybe closer to back home with the Titans or somebody like that, or come back to the Jets. But it feels like it's kind of died down and you haven't heard much from him. Is he maybe a guy that is waiting to see if a receiver gets hurt in the training camp for any NFL team, and then maybe, then the teams get desperate and give him more money? Is he kind of waiting for that? We'll see, but Corey Davis still seems to be an option possibly if the Jets want to bring another pass catcher, because look, I think there could be some concerns outside of Garrett Wilson, Malachi Corley, or Mike Williams. What are you going to get out of Brownlee, Gibson, and Lazard? I do think Lazard will be better with Aaron Rodgers, but how much better? How much better is he going to be? This was a guy that was statistically one of the worst wide receivers in football last year. Legitimately. He was that bad. He wasn't just bad he was legitimately NFL-wise. He had statistically, he was the worst wide receiver in many categories last season. So how much of a jump can he really make? Brownlee year 2, Gibson year 2, both guys you like, but then again, would you want that? Or would you rely on more of a steady guy like a Corey Davis or somebody like that? So I could still see them going out there, maybe adding another pass catcher. I will say an interior offense line. Other than that, there's nothing really else you need to do. Your tight end room set. Your offensive line, other than interior-wise, is pretty much set, especially at the tackle positions. Fashanu backing up Smith. Warren, Bakia, Moses, maybe your left tackle and right tackle tandem of the future. Defensively, again, it's safety. It's Justin Simmons. I don't know. I don't think Marcus May. I know some people have floated out Marcus May being a name. I doubt that happens. Him and Jamal Adams both kind of had a little bit of a falling out after their Jet careers. They both kind of ended. It seems like the Jets, that duo of Jamal Adams and Marcus May, feels like, Jamal Adams was dealt. Then Marcus May played one more year. He was kind of dealt. It seemed like both of those guys did not end on very good notes within the organization. So it feels like I doubt Marcus May would come back. I doubt that would happen. And if you're going to go out and get a safety, I would take Simmons 10 times out of 10 over really any of these other guys. But that's if the Jets want to do that. Again, they've never really valued too high at the safety position. There's been safeties out there for them to take, and they've never done it. Is now different. We'll see. But that's really your two deep depth chart the way it is right now. And when you break it down compared to what they were rolling out last year, it's a major difference. Major difference. And a lot of credit goes to Joe Douglas for that. This team's loaded. You take away the Jets, you take away the logo, you take away all that stuff. Because I know when people look at this roster, like, oh, it's the same old Jets, same old Jets. This, in my eyes, is the best roster in the division and a roster that can compete for a Lombardi. I know that might sound crazy, but it's a roster that can compete in the playoffs. If they're healthy, this is a roster that you can go into any week thinking that, you know what, we have a chance to win. You have a chance to win. Not going to win every game, but you have a chance. And that's all you can ask for. So let me know your thoughts on the New York Jets roster as currently constructed right now. More moves coming. Want more moves, don't want more moves. Feel like it's set. Are you guys as optimistic as I am in terms of the way this roster is structured? That is also part of my mindset as well, with just some of the depth is like you're one injury away at a couple positions from becoming really thin. And that's why I just don't think it can hurt to go out there. Just with the history of this team and all the injuries in the MetLife turf, I'm still scared. So scared of that. Still scared. Like I am of the MetLife turf. I think every Jet fan is. We could joke about it, but it's the truth. The amount of injuries that has happened on that turf to key players on this team. The quarterback, for crying out loud. 4 snaps in. It can't hurt to have depth at some of these other positions. So I could definitely see the Jets going out and signing those guys, probably more towards camp. But then again, we'll see. Douglas has not been shy to go out and sign guys during camp after what he sees from this team. Because camp's the first big test. We got to get through OTAs first. OTAs will be a good look at what this team looks like. There will be 10 OTA practices starting on May 20th, I believe. So we'll have coverage of all those practices and the latest happenings of all those things. So that'll do it for another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green, episode 304 in the books. Make sure to like and subscribe. As always, we'll have a lot more content coming your way. Any news and notes surrounding the team, we'll discuss it. We've got some channel or a couple topics coming up here within the next couple weeks. A little bit of this time period is a little slow in terms of news because you kind of come away from the draft. Rosters are pretty set. You have some moves here and there, but like I mentioned, it feels like for a while, until it feels like for past seasons, I should say, for a while, NFL GMs at this point, it seems like kind of wait until training camp to potentially make moves, depending on how the things look in camp. So we'll see if the Jets wait that long, but that'll do it. Another episode in the books. Make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, appreciate all you listening on all the different audio podcast platforms. We'll see you in the next episode. Until then, JETS, Jets. Thanks for tuning in.